In 2003, a Goldman Sachs trader accidentally made an extra $2 million for the firm. The client got exactly what they paid for. Nothing went wrong. The hedge just moved in Goldman's favor on a massive structured note deal. And when the managing partner found out, he ordered the trader to call the client immediately and unwind the profit. Give back $2 million for free. Now, you're probably thinking that's insane, but here's what's actually insane. That decision is why Goldman Sachs manages $3.4 trillion in assets, while smaller firms are fighting over scraps. And it's one of about 9 backward-seeming lessons that everyone who works there learns, whether they last 6 months or 20 years. Things that sound like bad business advice, but are actually how the top 0.1% operate. So I spent the last month talking to former Goldman people, reading internal training docs, and reverse engineering why nobody who leaves that place ever talks trash about it, even the ones who got fired. And what I found is a system that teaches you the invisible rules of how money actually moves. Here's what we're doing. I'm going to walk you through the Goldman Sachs curriculum that doesn't exist on paper. The stuff you only learn by watching how decisions get made when billions are on the line. And I'll show you how every single lesson is actually about incentives and second-order effects, which is how you know it's real and not just corporate mythology. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones are mathematically wrong. It uses BlackRock and Vanguard logic to expose the weak points in your plan, and I only ask for your email to send the report, so I don't store any of your financial data. Link in the description. Let me start with the central idea that explains everything else. Goldman Sachs operates on what they internally call long-term greed. And this is not a metaphor. This is the actual term. It means you delay gratification on purpose because the most lucrative opportunities are exponential in the future, not linear in the present. That $2 million giveaway, that was long-term greed in action. They gave up a short-term win to protect a long-term relationship because the lifetime value of that client was going to be 50 or 100 times the $2 million they returned. Plus, that client is now going to tell that story at every dinner party, every golf outing, every private jet conversation for the rest of their life. Goldman essentially bought a $2 million marketing campaign that will run forever. You cannot buy that kind of brand evangelism. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Most people hear long-term greed and think it's just fancy talk for be nice to customers. But that's not what's happening. Goldman isn't being nice. They're being greedy. They're just operating on a longer time horizon than you are. The difference is that they've done the math on customer lifetime value, and they know that every single interaction is either earning them the right to keep playing or burning that option to the ground. When you understand that framework, you realize that giving back $2 million isn't generosity. It's maximizing expected value across a longer time window. It's the same reason Amazon took losses for a decade. Same reason Costco operates on a 1.5% margin. Long-term greed looks like bad short-term business until you see the compounding effects. There's a story about a young analyst who joined Goldman in 2005. First week on the job, his managing partner told him he wasn't allowed to call any clients yet, even though that was literally his job description. The partner said, "Why would a client trust you with their money if you can't generate money for yourself out of thin air?" And this kid thought it was a joke until he realized everyone was serious. So he went around asking every senior person he could find how you make $100,000 out of nothing. One guy finally told him about options trading. Took him 4 months, but he turned $100,000 into $200,000 using option strategies, made $100,000 in profit. And only then was he allowed to touch a client account. Now, the surface lesson here is prove yourself, but that's not the real lesson. The real lesson is about skin in the game and proof of skill. Goldman wanted this kid to learn that he could generate value without leaning on someone else's capital or reputation. Because once you have that proof, once you know you can create wealth from nothing, you approach every client conversation with a totally different energy. You're not desperate. You're not selling. You're operating from abundance. And clients can smell that. This is incentive design at its finest. They forced him into a situation where the only way forward was to develop a skill that would serve him and the firm forever. He wasn't going to forget how to do that. And Goldman now had an advisor who could genuinely say, I know how to make money because I've done it for myself. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. But here's the escalation. That same analyst, 5 years later, is now managing a client account. He's executing several trades, and he accidentally trades a stock during a closed window period. The client is a director at that company. Insider. Huge problem. The compliance systems should have caught it, but didn't. And this is where most people would panic, try to figure out if they could hide it, maybe wait to see if anyone notices. But Goldman has a different rule. Bad news does not get better with time. So this guy stops everything immediately. He role plays the conversation he's about to have. He calls legal counsel. And within 3 minutes, he's on the phone with the client, laying out exactly what happened, how they're going to unwind the trade, and how they're going to manage communications with the SEC. The client found out from Goldman first, not from their own lawyer, not from the government, from Goldman. And here's the twist. That client trusted Goldman more after the screw up than they did before, because now they knew Goldman would never hide the ball. This is second order thinking. Most people think the first order consequence of a mistake is loss of trust. And it is if you try to hide it. But if you own it immediately, the second order consequence is increased trust, because you've proven that you'll be honest even when it's painful. The client now knows that if something ever goes really wrong, they'll hear about it first and fast. That's worth more than perfection, because perfection is a lie. Everyone screws up. The question is, do you trust the person to tell you when they do? Now, you're probably asking yourself, okay, but how does Goldman make sure everyone actually follows these rules? Because these are expensive rules. Giving back $2 million, calling clients immediately with bad news, letting analysts waste months trying to prove themselves. Most firms would say this is inefficient. And here's where the system design gets really elegant. Goldman uses something I call hard work paranoia, and it's built into the culture through one simple mechanism. They put the best of the best in one room. Everyone who gets hired at Goldman is exceptional. Top school, top grades, already successful. And when everyone is exceptional, the only advantage you have left is effort. So people start staying late, showing up early, practicing presentations until midnight, role-playing client conversations over and over, taking calls at 3 a.m. And this isn't because Goldman tells them to. It's because when you're surrounded by people who are just as smart as you, just as credentialed as you, you realize that effort is the only variable you fully control. It's environmental game theory. The culture doesn't demand hard work through rules or incentives. It demands hard work through peer comparison. You don't want to be the person who's seen slacking. Not because you'll get fired, but because you'll lose respect. And at that level, respect is the currency that matters. This is how Goldman maintains quality without micromanaging. They've designed an environment where the incentive structure is self-enforcing. It's brilliant and exhausting in equal measure. Let me give you a concrete case study with real numbers so you can see how this plays out. There's a client, a tech CEO who sold his company for $900 million in 2019. He's now sitting on $450 million in liquid cash after taxes. He calls Goldman because he wants to preserve the wealth, generate some income, and set up his kids. Now, the obvious play for Goldman is to put him in high-fee products, hedge funds, private equity, structured notes. They could easily charge 1% to 2% annually on $450 million. That's $4.5 to $9 million per year in fees, just for existing. But here's what actually happened. Goldman built him a framework they called the investment X-ray. Every investment gets scored across 4 dimensions, each worth 25 points, for a total of 100 points. Category 1, capital preservation. What's the probability this goes to 0? Category 2, tax efficiency. How is this taxed? Category 3, cash flow or yield. Does it produce income while you hold it? Category 4, growth. Will this appreciate over time? They use this framework to show him that 60% of his wealth should be in boring index funds, 20% in municipal bonds for tax-free income, 15% in real estate for diversification and inflation protection, and only 5% in alternatives. This portfolio would generate about $12 million per year in income at a 4% withdrawal rate. And Goldman's fee? 50 basis points. That's 0.5%. $2.25 million per year. They left $7 million per year on the table by not pushing high-fee products. Why? Long-term greed. Because this client is 48 years old. If he lives to 90, that's 42 more years of fees. At $2.25 million per year, that's $94.5 million in total fees over his lifetime. But more importantly, he's now a Goldman evangelist. He's going to refer every other tech founder he knows. And some of those founders are going to have billion-dollar exits. Goldman sacrificed short-term fee income to build an annuity stream and a referral engine. They optimize for lifetime value, not quarterly revenue. This is the entire game. Now, here's what really surprised me when I dug into this. Goldman also teaches you to think in frameworks. And I don't mean this in a vague, have a process way. I mean, everything is taught as a framework because frameworks do three things. One, they help people understand complex concepts. Two, they help people feel safe because they have a structure to lean on. And three, they help people remember what you told them, which is the most important part. If someone can't recall your advice, it doesn't matter how good it was. Quick example. When Goldman describes itself to new clients, they use a three-part framework. We care about our people, our process, and our platform. That's it. People equals world-class talent. Process equals systems that have been refined over decades. Platform equals access to deals and opportunities that nobody else has. You can remember that. You can repeat that. And it positions Goldman as having an unfair advantage in all three areas. Now compare that to most financial advisors who just ramble about their experience and their values and their commitment to excellence. Nobody remembers that. But a three-part framework, that sticks. The same client I mentioned earlier with the $450 million, Goldman taught his son the investment X-ray framework. That kid is now 30 years old and running a hedge fund. And he still uses that framework to evaluate every investment he considers. That's the power of teaching instead of telling. You're not just solving today's problem. You're giving someone a tool they'll use for the rest of their life. And every time they use it, they're going to think of you. But here's the kicker that ties all of this together. After working with Goldman for a decade, after seeing how they operate, after watching them make decisions that seem crazy in the moment, but brilliant in retrospect, you start to notice something. Nobody talks trash about Goldman. You can go online right now and search for Goldman Sachs horror stories. You'll find some. But compared to other investment banks, it's weirdly quiet. I know people who left Goldman after 6 months, people who got fired, people who burned out, and none of them trashed the firm. Why? Two reasons. First, people knew exactly what they signed up for. The culture was transparent, the rules were clear, the standards were explicit. So when someone got promoted ahead of you, even if they were younger or less experienced, you knew why. The meritocracy was real. It might not have been fair in the cosmic sense, but it was consistent and logical. You either played harder or you left. There's no resentment when the rules are clear and applied evenly. And second, the best of the best don't hate. When you've put in the work, when you've seen how much effort it takes to win at the highest level, you respect anyone else who's doing the same thing, even if you're competing with them, even if they beat you. There's a mutual understanding that we're all playing an incredibly difficult game, and the fact that you made it this far means you belong in the arena. Goldman hires people who understand that, and once you're in that culture, you absorb it. Now, let me give you the comedic reality check here. You might be thinking, okay, Tom, this all sounds great, but I don't work at Goldman Sachs. I'm not managing billions of dollars. What am I supposed to do with this information? And that's fair. So let me translate these lessons into something you can actually use. Lesson 1, stop optimizing for the next 12 months. Most people lose money because they're playing a short-term game in a long-term system. If you're investing in index funds, your time horizon should be measured in decades, not quarters. That means you ignore the noise. You ignore the cable news panic. You ignore the hot stock tips. You show up, you contribute to your 401k, you rebalance once a year, and you let compounding do the work. Boring wins. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. Lesson 2, build frameworks for every decision you make repeatedly. If you're evaluating job offers, build a framework. If you're deciding whether to buy a house, build a framework. Frameworks force you to think clearly about trade-offs. and they prevent you from making emotional decisions that you'll regret later. This is especially important for money decisions because your brain is terrible at making rational choices when fear or greed are involved. Lesson 3, own your mistakes faster than anyone expects. If you screw up at work, tell your boss before they find out from someone else. If you miss a deadline with a client, call them immediately with a plan to fix it. Most people try to hide mistakes because they think it'll protect their reputation, but the opposite is true. Owning mistakes fast builds trust faster than anything else you can do, because now people know you'll be honest even when it costs you something. That's rare, and it's valuable. Look, the real lesson from Goldman Sachs isn't about working harder or being smarter. It's about understanding incentives and playing a longer game than everyone around you. Most people are optimizing for this quarter, this year, maybe the next 5 years. The people who build serious wealth are optimizing for the next 50 years. They're thinking in systems. They're thinking in second order effects. They're asking, what does this decision unlock 10 years from now? Instead of, what does this decision pay me next month? That shift in time horizon is the entire game. Everything else is just tactics. And if you take nothing else from this video, take that. Extend your time horizon, understand the incentives, and stop playing the short-term game that everyone else is losing.